She entered the UK with nothing but a fake name and a perfect plan. Known only as Lin Yue, she led one of the most sophisticated laundering rings London has ever seen, cleaning 55 millions through fake companies, luxury businesses and digital smoke trails. But just as the police closed in, she vanished without a trace. This is the untold story of Ghost Silk, and how Lin Yue almost got away with it all. In early 2019, 6 individuals arrived in London, each entering the country through different routes and airports to avoid suspicion. They didn't come all at once, and they didn't attract attention. Their backgrounds were clean, with no criminal records or red flags. They rented modest homes across East London. Nothing extravagant, just quiet flats that blended into working-class neighborhoods. Each of them took up regular jobs on paper: restaurant staff, delivery drivers, shop assistants. But these roles were simply masks to hide the purpose of their arrival. Beneath the surface, something far more elaborate was unfolding. The group wasn't made up of typical street-level criminals. They were highly educated, technologically skilled and disciplined. Each had a specific function, one focused on logistics and communications, another on banking and documentation, one handled front companies, and another served as the tech operator. Their plan wasn't just to steal or scam, it was to become invisible in the very system meant to stop people like them. Everything about their lives was designed to look normal. They paid rent on time, rarely interacted with neighbors, and never showed signs of wealth. But in reality, they were building the skeleton of a money laundering machine. Using connections back in China and across Asia, they began gathering fake passports, IDs, and business licenses. These weren't cheap fakes, they were advanced forgeries, crafted using stolen identity data, and printed to pass even close inspection. With these documents, they opened multiple bank accounts across the UK using different aliases. They didn't just use major banks, they targeted smaller online-based financial services too, places with less oversight and more automation. It made tracing activity harder and gave them the freedom to move money across institutions with minimal friction. Then came the companies. On paper, they looked like ordinary small businesses. An electronics import company based in Croydon, a consulting firm registered in Manchester, a textile exporter in Glasgow. These businesses had logos, websites, customer service emails, and even occasional invoices to maintain the illusion. In reality, no goods were imported or sold. The purpose of these companies was singular: to serve as vehicles for moving dirty money into clean channels. The network was complex, overlapping, and international. Each company had accounts in multiple currencies. Some were linked to offshore entities in the Cayman Islands, others to firms in Dubai or Singapore. Behind it all was a digital backbone, encrypted and layered with proxy servers, private messaging channels, and secure cloud storage. The tech member of the group set up this system to keep everything invisible. Messages were deleted automatically. Financial records were updated in real time, and then encrypted. Data was never stored in one place for long. If anyone in law enforcement had stumbled across one part of the network in those early days, they would have found nothing more than a small, seemingly dormant business. The group operated in silence for months. They never drew attention to themselves, never flashed money, never made mistakes. To neighbors and coworkers, they were just new arrivals trying to make a living in a foreign country. But behind the smiles and quiet routines, a 55 million-ton criminal empire was starting to take shape carefully, quietly, and right under everyone's nose. Once their structure was in place, the gang began its real work. Across the UK, millions of pounds from illegal trades, drugs, counterfeit goods, underground casinos piled up in hidden stashes, and criminal safe houses. Cash like that couldn't be spent freely or deposited without questions. It needed to be cleaned, turned into something that looked legal and untouchable. The gang positioned themselves as professional cleaners for this dirty money. Their promise to clients was simple: complete anonymity, minimal risk, and fast results. To begin, they set up a system of money mules. Individuals paid to deposit small sums of cash into bank accounts across London. These weren't just one or two people. There were dozens, most of them unaware of the bigger picture. Some were students, some were struggling workers, and others were recruited from vulnerable communities. Each mule received strict instructions: never deposit more than a few thousand at a time, use specific ATMs, spread deposits across different banks, and rotate locations every few days. This process allowed the gang to move large volumes of cash without triggering suspicion. The money was funneled into the shell companies the gang had created earlier. From there it appeared as income from consulting fees, product sales or service contracts. To reinforce the illusion, the gang generated fake invoices and shipping documents to show that these transactions were tied to international trade. In truth, no products were sold, and no services were provided. But on paper, everything looked legitimate. These documents helped justify why money was entering the UK from abroad or leaving the country through foreign accounts. They also began exploiting the banking system's gaps. By making use of newer digital banks and cryptocurrency exchanges, the gang found ways to move money quickly and with limited human oversight. Some of the funds were converted into cryptocurrency, passed through multiple wallets, and then converted back into different currencies in jurisdictions with weak regulation. In other cases, money was wired to international accounts using false names or layered through multiple intermediary companies to obscure the trail. To avoid patterns, they constantly shifted their methods. One week, they might focus on property transactions. The next week on importing fake electronics. If a bank froze one account, they would immediately activate another. No account or channel stayed active for long. Their movements were calculated, rehearsed, and coldly efficient. At no point did any individual transaction seem suspicious. But over time, millions were moving through the system with stunning speed. By late 2020, nearly 55 million had been processed, with almost no interruption. Some of it had been moved offshore, some converted into luxury assets, and some parked in foreign accounts. The gang kept meticulous digital records, encrypted and coded, ensuring they could track everything without exposing themselves. They celebrated no milestones, took no unnecessary risks, and left no room for carelessness. For nearly 2 years they operated like a well-oiled machine, silent, invisible, and always one step ahead. To the outside world, the gang appeared successful, but not suspiciously so. They lived in clean, modest homes and dressed in a way that never drew attention. But behind the scenes, they were carefully building a visible front for their operations. One that could explain the increasing flow of money without raising red flags. This next phase was all about legitimacy. If anyone looked too closely, the gang wanted them to see successful entrepreneurs, not criminals. They opened a luxury tea shop in Soho, fully staffed and beautifully designed. The interior was elegant, complete with handcrafted decor and expensive imported teas from Asia. Customers came in regularly, unaware that the business was never meant to make a profit. It was there to justify cash flow. It allowed large deposits to be recorded as sales and payments to be disguised as supplier costs. At the same time, the gang launched a car rental company in Croydon, with a small fleet of used vehicles and a flashy website. The company catered mostly to fake clients, other shell businesses run by the same network. They also funded a tech startup in Canary Wharf. It had a sleek office, a team of hired developers, and a promising app that attracted attention in the local business press. Investors were shown inflated numbers and polished presentations. This company was used to launder higher value payments, often hidden within software licensing and subscription services. The app never truly worked and the business model didn't matter. It existed only to clean money at scale. In addition to these fronts, the gang invested in property. They purchased small residential flats in Chelsea, converted warehouses in Hackney, and acquired a few rundown storefronts in Camden. Most of these were bought under different names using money already laundered through earlier stages. These assets gave the appearance of financial success and allowed the group to shift money into long-term investments that would increase in value over time. Rent from tenants, even when low, provided an excuse for steady income streams. With each layer they added, the operation grew more convincing. Fake suppliers were created, complete with phone numbers and websites. Emails were carefully scripted, contracts were signed, and receipts were produced. All fake but realistic. The businesses had tax records, employee salaries, and even routine audits by friendly accountants paid to overlook the numbers. They didn't stop at traditional methods. Some of the laundered money began flowing into less traceable areas: casino chips, rare watches, and high-end artwork. These luxury items were purchased through intermediaries and auction houses that didn't always require thorough identity checks. The gang would buy, hold, and resell these items to create the illusion of legitimate profits. Their confidence grew as the system held together. Money moved through so many hands and businesses that tracing it became nearly impossible. They believed they had created something unbreakable. For nearly 2 years they lived in this dual reality: ordinary lives during the day, and a financial empire rooted in deception underneath. Every step looked legitimate on the surface, but the foundation was built on lies. And eventually, one small crack would begin to expose it all. In late 2020, a financial transaction quietly triggered an internal alarm within a mid-sized UK bank. It was a wire transfer for $950,000, labeled as payment for antique collectibles. On its own, the transaction didn't seem overly unusual, but the sender was a dissolved company, and the recipient was a newly formed business with no transaction history. When compliance officers reviewed the details, something felt off. The invoice attached looked hastily made, and the origin of funds couldn't be verified. Instead of dismissing it, one officer decided to escalate it to the National Crime Agency. The agency's Financial Crime Division began looking into the payment. What started as a routine check soon led investigators into something much bigger. The recipient account had connections to other companies registered under different names but with matching directors, contact numbers, and shared addresses. On paper, these companies had nothing to do with one another, but a pattern began to emerge. One company would send a large payment to another, which would then forward a similar amount to a third business, often in a different country. The paper trail was long and confusing, but not accidental. Digging deeper, investigators pulled property records, shell company registrations, and banking activities. They noticed certain addresses appeared repeatedly, often tied to different identities. Many of the names used in the documents were fake, or belonged to people who didn't exist. Others were real individuals whose identities had been stolen. Slowly, pieces began to form a network of interlinked financial activity stretching from London to Hong Kong, from Dubai to Zurich. Authorities decided to move quietly, placing some of the identified properties under surveillance. One location in East London, listed as a small logistics office, showed unusual activity. Vans would arrive at odd hours, and unknown individuals entered with sealed boxes and left empty-handed. Cameras were installed from a distance, and license plates were tracked. In time, patterns formed. People moved between the same locations on fixed routines, avoiding public attention but clearly connected. A crucial breakthrough came when agents accessed an apartment linked to a shell company. It had been abandoned suddenly. Inside, they found a digital safe, several destroyed phones, and a laptop. While most of the files were encrypted, forensic specialists recovered fragments of spreadsheets and communications. The content revealed internal code names, company structures, and payment instructions written in a combination of Mandarin and English. One term appeared repeatedly: ghost silk. Investigators finally had a name for the operation. They now knew they were dealing with a professional criminal syndicate, not just a small group of fraudsters. Surveillance expanded, search warrants were prepared, and a timeline was set. The evidence was mounting, but one question remained: who was running it all? One name kept surfacing in hidden corners of the documents. A woman with no official records in the UK, no social media presence, and no known address. Yet traces of her were everywhere. Emails, encrypted messages, signatures on contracts. She had stayed in the shadows, directing everything from behind the scenes, and as the net closed in, she would prove to be the most elusive piece of all. In March 2021, after months of surveillance, analysis, and planning, the National Crime Agency launched a coordinated operation across London and beyond. In the early hours of the morning, armed officers raided 8 locations simultaneously: homes, offices, and storage units linked to the Ghost Silk network. 3 members of the gang were arrested without resistance. One was found shredding documents in a flat in Hackney. Another was asleep in a penthouse apartment recently purchased under a false name. A third was picked up from a rented office space, where dozens of fake invoices and business records were stored in neat rows of filing cabinets. Later that day, 2 more suspects were intercepted at Birmingham Airport. They had booked seats on a private charter flight under false identities. Both carried forged passports, large amounts of cash, and untraceable digital wallets. Authorities believed they had been tipped off, but not soon enough to escape. Their luggage held documents that would become key pieces of evidence: details of cryptocurrency wallets, lists of shell companies, and contact information for international partners the group had worked with in Dubai and Southeast Asia. But one critical figure was missing. The suspected leader, the woman whose alias appeared in encrypted financial logs, had vanished. Her last known location was a train station in Bristol, recorded by a grainy CCTV camera the night before the raids. She had no checked bags, no electronic devices, and no traceable ticket. Investigators believe she may have used a private car to cross the border into another country or paid a smuggler to take her out by sea. Her real name was never confirmed, and all attempts to track her digital footprint came up empty. It was as if she had planned her disappearance long before the operation began. Back in London, the dismantling of the network began. Officers recovered partial records from encrypted drives, seized high-end watches, luxury vehicles, and a collection of art pieces bought through intermediaries. Dozens of bank accounts were frozen, yet of the 55 million believed to have been laundered through Ghost Silk, only around 8 million was ever recovered. The rest had either been moved offshore, invested into property under complex ownership chains, or converted into cryptocurrencies and lost in the maze of digital transactions. The arrested members were charged with multiple counts of money laundering, identity fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crime. Court hearings revealed the scale and sophistication of the operation. The prosecution presented a trail of deception that spanned continents, included more than 70 fake companies, and fooled banks, regulators, and clients for nearly 2 years. Sentences ranged from 7 to 14 years. Some of the gang cooperated in exchange for reduced terms, but none could offer more than fragments of insight into the whereabouts of their leader. To this day, the Ghost Silk case remains one of the most sophisticated laundering operations ever uncovered in the UK. Story continues to be studied by financial crime experts worldwide, not only for its scale, but for its mystery. The mastermind walked away without a trace. Her true identity still unknown, her final destination never confirmed.